Hello. Today I'm reading Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow. And let me ask you, do you think that the world has a couple issues but is mostly rational and run by intelligent people doing their logical best in order to make the world a better place? I have some bad news for you. The main lesson of the book is that there are two systems to our brain. One is the intuitive, common sense, impulsive system one. And this one is responsible for forming what is normal in our worldview. Unfortunately, it actually pays attention to what is common and forms heuristics, or rules of thumb, in order to jump to conclusions very, very fast. You also can't turn it off, and it believes and does things constantly. It is the opinionated part of your other part of your brain is system 2. That is the logical, rules-oriented, well-reasoned, high-energy, lazy part of your brain that can turn off your system 1 during a heated argument or a time when things really get tense and suddenly you kind of shut down and become reserved. That part of your brain is responsible for holding multiple things at one time, doing things like a math, holding two disagreeable opinions, and trying to work out which one is actually more reliable in a different situation. System 2 is unfortunately not activated pretty much until you put yourself into a situation where it's required for most people. System 2 kind of works like a muscle, it looks like, where it consumes a lot of energy to either do hard mental work, or to stop you or suppress emotions, or to stop you from doing vices and change your habits. And just like muscle use, over time, it actually gets better. Older people seem to have better working memory, which is the thing that System 2 uses. And System 1 uses associative memory. So the more memories you have, the more you'll trigger one of the other ones, and more things will come into play. But System 2, if you're doing a lot of mental effort, chances are you will indulge in your vices. If sugar is one of those vices, that's actually okay, because it tends to recover System 1 and the energy in your head faster than other things for some reason. So sugar is actually helpful to your brain. Not that it seems to matter much, because our System 1 seems to be doing about 95% of the work. And yes, even for the smart people. Unfortunately, there's really no way to get around this. Experts, in expert opinion, have been shown to still use the stereotypy part of their brain. They just put themselves into theoretically extreme examples, so they have those memories to draw upon very easily to form a more accurate stereotype. But it still has the same problems of jumping to conclusions based on what you think is normal, what you think of as common, what is your common sense. It's still emotional. It's still intuitive. This leads to an interesting conclusion that our brains are naturally conspiracy theorists, and we should probably second-guess ourselves all the time. However, that's inefficient, both in that it removes our self-confidence and our sense of self, and that it's actually too slow to make decisions on an everyday level. So a more efficient thing to do is just kind of go with the flow, be impulsive, but come up with situations and cues when we want to switch to a System 2, more statistical, more analytical kind of situation, such as a new situation, or when meeting someone new, or when you're in a really challenging place or situation. Because System 2 tends to remove problems, and System 1 tends to kind of take whatever you're doing and go off in a really weird and random direction, tangenting to connect as many things as possible. There are other things that this book recommends in order to get over your biases that will be occurring. You should assume that they are, because you're human. But I'll get to them at the end of the book. First, I'm going to list out all the rules of thumb and all the biases that are a huge part of every decision we make. There are 5 big heuristics that come into play with nearly every decision we make. Heuristic number 1, the affect heuristic. Instead of asking whether something is a good idea, we tend to ask whether we like it, or whether it's easy, which is somewhat the same thing, the ease and pleasantness of it. This actually has weird implications, which have all proven to be true. If you tell someone to prove a trait and give 6 examples, they are more likely to be confident than someone who is told to give 16 examples, because the people who had to give 6 examples didn't have to work as hard. It was easier, so they were more confident about it. Even though the people who had 16 had more, and even if they had better examples, the people who had 6 had more confidence in their ability. Number 2, the anchoring heuristic. If you are given recent information on a topic, you will assume that that is relevant, and your brain will use it, even if it is ridiculous. Someone who is applying for a job and asks for 17 billion gold doubloons and has the interviewer respond to that, the interviewer is more likely to give a higher salary, even with that ridiculous number. It is actually better to step away from the table than give a second unreasonable answer back, because our brains are automatically hardwired to use information, and it's hard to stop it. Number 3, the availability heuristic. The things that we remember from our own lives as opposed to the lives of everyone, we assume are more common and more likely to occur than they actually are. For example, if you asked how likely is it that someone will divorce, you will probably go in your head thinking of everyone else who has divorced in your life, and you'll look for traits that compare them. But that might just be something from your area or your culture. So if you wanted, you could look much farther than that. You could also look to an algorithm that says the most common predictable trait of people staying together is how much sex they have compared to how much they argue. And let that second number remove from the first. Heuristic number 3, the representative heuristic. We are more likely to believe in something if it conforms to our idea and image about that thing. There are more people who vote for someone who looks confident and competent than there are people who vote for people who are actually good at their job. If you hear a story about someone that conforms to your ideas or stereotypes about that thing, you are more likely to believe that thing. For example, if I tell you that there is a person in a college who is a sci-fi nerd, who makes puns all the time, who is not particularly imaginative, but usually loves to read the imaginative stories of others, likes tinkering with machines, has made robots and other things in their spare time. Which major do you think they are? The answer to that, probably business. They are the most common. If you thought computer engineering or engineering of some kind, statistically, you're probably wrong. Number 5, the commitment heuristic. If we've already put effort into something, we're probably going to keep putting effort into that something, and we're probably going to defend it, even if we are presented with overwhelming evidence to stop. What we should do is probably analyze it and come up with times to analyze it before creative decision to decide when to quit. Surprisingly, it turns out that quitters who quit at the right time do get ahead. And that's all the heuristics we use to jump to conclusions when we don't have enough information. Now here's 12 biases we use to judge information in the first place. Number 1, the belief bias. We are more likely to believe in something if it conforms to what we see as common or likely in our regular life, when it's possible our regular life is actually just extremely specific and extremely weird. 2, confirmation bias. We are more likely to believe in something that conforms to our previous ideas on how things work and how the world works. When in actuality, if something new or something that conflicts with that information is brought up, that could mean that we believe in something that is wrong, or a large string of things that are wrong. But we tend to connect the things in our head even when it shouldn't be connected. Number 3, the optimism bias. We overestimate how well things will work out and how well we'll obtain a favorable result. We should bet that failure is just as likely to occur to us as the average person, unless we have extremely compelling reason why our chances are high. To put this in perspective, leaders who are considered great by their history and by all performers on the market tend to only change their companies by about 10% compared to people who are considered very poor or have a very poor track record of taking care of their companies. This is despite the fact that leaders and CEOs are fairly well worshipped by the media. Number 4, hindsight bias. It always looks more predictable after it happened than when it was happening. This could be because you were too focused on the moment. This could be because you were focusing on details that didn't end up mattering at the end. This could be because of a process that went to the top that just didn't happen to work for that idea. This could just be because everyone is overestimating how simple it was because all the data has been reduced after the fact. But more often than not, people just think it was obvious because it already happened. And now it's in their head as something that they think was obvious that it was going to happen. And you need to take that into account. If you succeed, people will say it's inevitable. If you fail, people say it's inevitable, even if you use the same reasoning for both times. Number 5, the framing effect. People care more about how information is presented than what that information actually contains. People care more about being presented charismatically than they do about wisdom. It's a shame, but it seems to be true. Font choices have influenced how well people perform on tests, with oddly the people who have worse fonts doing better but hating the tests more. Probably because they need to think about it more. 6, loss aversion. People will make choices that avoid a loss more than they will pursue a win, often to their own detriment. Number 7, the narrative fallacy. We make stories out of every piece of data we have and tend not to believe in luck. Confidence seems to be the ability to construct a great story made by all of the evidence that we have available to us. We don't tend to seek out things that disprove the sense of confidence. We also tend to give narratives to things that are just noise, that are just out there. Having good confidence does not mean you are right. Having a good story does not mean that story is true. Number 8, the regression fallacy. Most things return to normal over time. This means that if you do really well one day, the next day you'll probably do about average. If you do really bad one day, the next day you'll return to average. Some days you have good days, some days you have bad days. Unfortunately, because people give narratives to everything, if a coach praises you and then sees your numbers decline and critiques you for a bad performance, then sees those numbers improve, they'll generally think the critique is working and become more of an asshole. Don't let the fact that things return to normal make you think that being negative is helping much more than being positive, as that's what it seems to imply if you don't realize people are just having a bad day or having a good day. Number 9, the planning fallacy. If something has a lot of useful benefits, we will tend to underestimate the risks. If something really removes the risks, we will tend to view the benefits as something that we should take on ourselves, even if we shouldn't. We tend to think of something that has any benefit to us as better than it actually is. Number 10, the halo effect. If someone has a trait you like, such as being attractive, or really thinking that dogs are super cute, which they are, or really thinking that cats are super cute, which they are, you are more likely to think that they have other good traits. And you are more likely able to think that they are really competent in all areas equal to the best competence that you've seen them. The opposite is also true. If you see someone acting incompetently, you are more likely to assume that they are an incompetent person rather than incompetent at that one task. If they have a bad trait, you are more likely to assume that they have entirely bad traits. First impressions are a bitch, yo. Number 11. Number 11. The law of small numbers. We are very good at generalizing from a single, personal, particular story. We are very bad at coming up with single, personal stories from the general. For example, if you were told that 2 out of 12 people help people in a crowded situation because everyone else always has the same excuse, they expect the other people to do the rational, reasonable thing, and because everyone expects other people to do it, no one does anything, then you would believe that number. However, if I was to show you an interview with a lot of the people, and it showed how they were courageous star athletes, they were great, they helped people, they helped their grandma on the weekends, they were flirts of the school, they generally were well known for being outspoken, you would probably believe that that person helped out during a crowded incident. If I then told you, no, they didn't, you are more likely to realize how hard it is for people to help people, and how much people just assume that other people will act rationally and end up not taking actions that are obvious. That's deriving a general principle from a small personal story. But if I had just given you the numbers, you wouldn't have learned it. That's a problem with our brain. And the last bias, number 12. What you see is all there is. People are not likely to look for more information once they've been given information to start something. If you are told to jump to conclusions, you probably will. You'll use whatever information you have and construct the best story from that information that you can. If you are given time to look up more information, chances are you will discount that information in favor of the story that you came up with less information, citing it as irrelevant. This is a bad habit, but people form the best story with the information that they have, and they run with it. And that is a huge problem. That one has the most easily addressable way to fix it. Before you make a hard decision, write down everything you need to know before you could reasonably make that decision. Then research it. If you make a bullet point list of everything you need to know in order to figure out the decision in a reasonable way, with the assumption that you might be making mistakes, might be making bad judgment, and that there is probably a time limit, then you at least make a better judgment than someone who is given very little information and told to be intuitive about it. Unless, of course, you're an expert or a professional, in which case you probably think that you're too good for all of that, just using your judgment. Not saying that that's like how the world works or anything, but statistically that's how the way the world works. The information of this book suggests several things to do to confront these and be a little bit more logical in your life. 1, always look for the base rates, or how likely it is to be average across your situation. You don't want to look like how likely it is for this to occur in a region outside your area unless the information you're looking for is like universal. You want it to be in your area. Find a reliable source, see what the averages are, find the base rate. If you have intuitive judgments or nuance that affects the base rate, change those base rates to the best of your ability, then commit to whatever the numbers say, even if it is shitty. Assume that that is the truth, unless you find more information. That might mean you need to look for more information, but commit to that numerical decision and assume that it's true until you find that, or have the opportunity to find it. That's the best you can do. As for how to trust expert opinion, and how to figure out if you're improving at something, or if your opinion is worth a damn, generally algorithms are actually a simple way to do that. You figure out 6 traits that you want to measure, and then you find a way to measure them, and then you just try and improve those traits if they're relevant. Finding out which traits are relevant might take some research, but if you see some consistent trend, that's when you start putting it into the algorithm and you start trying to improve those traits. And that's it. It's a very simple procedure. You find out the numbers that matter, and then you just keep going towards those numbers. And that's how you get good at things. If you want to predict the future, or want to see what kind of future you want, then write down all the jobs or things that you want to do as a habit to have a lifestyle, and then you figure out which numbers tend to correspond to all those events. If you see traits that you need to develop that are across all the disciplines, then you work on those most of all. And bam, there you are. This book gives some life advice. Cool life coaching, bro. Lastly, Daniel Kahneman seems to suggest that algorithms and computers are so much better at judging situations than humans that it might actually be an unethical development that people are veering more towards humans than robots in a couple areas. And those are all the lessons that I learned from Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. I hope that this book has intrigued you and these lessons have lit up your mind as much as they did mine. I will start seeing the world more for a stereotypy, emotional, illogical place that occasionally uses logic after this book. I might also look more at his records, because right now I'm trusting too much of an expert opinion, when he left a really good paper trail to see if I agree with his methods, and I just haven't looked into those yet. Which I guess means I'm taking some of this book's lessons to heart. Oh well. I hope you enjoyed this long rant and talk, and that I'll see you tomorrow. Bye, everyone. If Zeus is the king of the gods, then why does Dionysus give us our purpose and show us the way? Why does moody Apollo take our joy from us as he shows the way? Beautiful though we know he is, we wish we could be more like him than Dionysus. Dionysus takes us And Apollo goes away to be the sun that guides us on another broken day.